Welcome to the channel, guys. I'm out here in the carport trying to get some motors built and hopefully get some projects going back together soon. And thought I'd take a few minutes, show you all what I'm working on, and kind of give you a comparison of the three motors I'm working on, because they're all small block Mopars. But I'm working on a 318 LA, a 360 Magnum, and a 5.7 Hemi. And honestly, working on the three different ones, it's pretty interesting how much they change over the years. So I'm gonna roll the intro and let's get into it.
Give it to me like.
Alright, here they are. On the left we have a 318 LA. This is the original motor out of my 86 D150. It's getting a little bit of head work, a cam, freshen up the bottom end. If y'all follow me on TikTok, this is the one that somebody claimed that had Pennzoil in it and started a big fight in the comment section. This motor, I'm wanting to make around 300, 350 on if I can. And it's going in that Daytona. This motor's going in my 89 Dodge Daytona ES. I'm doing a rear wheel drive conversion on it, so those of you that didn't know, cat's out of the bag now. Next to it here we have a 5.9 Magnum. This is out of a 98 Ram 1500. The truck I pulled this out of was actually really heartbreaking. It was a 98 single cab short bed 2-wheel drive in red. And anybody that knows me knows just how much I want one of those. But it being in the salvage yard, the title was deactivated and it was done for. So I pulled the motor. This engine is going in my 1986 Dodge W250. I was originally going to put that one in it, but I needed something a little heavier duty, a little more torque, because, well, it's a 3/4 ton pickup. The 318s are good. This is better. And then on the end here, just because, like, these two small blocks, like, these were made from 1964 to 1991. In 92, they introduced the Magnum to kind of replace this. And this carried up until 2002, and in 2003, they introduced this engine. Now, this particular one is out of an 05 Durango. This is a just basic run-of-the-mill 5.7 liter Hemi. Got non-Eagle heads on it. I guess you'd say the 03 to 08 cylinder heads. This engine was meant to replace this one because this one was not competing with GM's LS platform. And let me tell you, they took this engine, there's nothing it shares with this other than the bell housing. This engine is destined to go in the truck that engine came out of. It's my 1986 D150 single cab long bed 2-wheel drive. I've got a Torque Flight 727 to go behind this. I'm not really going to make much of a monster out of it. It'll have around 400, 450 horses naturally aspirated, maybe a little more. I am putting a carburetor on it because I'm a heathen. This motor, like, I'm not really going for a high horse, high strung out build. I want a comfortable truck that's decently quick that I can drive anywhere. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty. I'm going to yank the heads off these real quick, because I want to start with the short block on all of them. None of these motors are complete, by the way. That one, I have to actually pull all the way back apart. It got some water in it, and I think I might end up taking it to a machine shop or grabbing a second block. And these two are on their way apart, so don't be surprised if there's parts missing and all that. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get the heads yanked off of these so I can kind of show you the rotating assembly on them and all that. All right, now that the heads are off, we're gonna walk over here and we're gonna start with the 318. This is a 318 LA motor, so 1964 to 1991. This is the old style heads, all that. Starting on the rotating assembly, you can see that it's got flat top pistons. They are, however, set down just a little bit in the hole. This motor had originally like 9.1, 9.2 to 1 compression. This is a small Gara motor at the end of the day. This actually used to have an air pump on it that I took off, allegedly. So you can't expect much. Stock 2-barrel motor originally made 145 horsepower at the crank. I know, absolutely impressive. And as you can see here, it has a flat tappet cam, not a roller cam. Get it to focus there. Flat tappet cam, flat top pistons. Absolutely nothing special about this motor beyond like it's a V8. That's about all it's got going for it in stock configuration. Moving over to the 5.9 Magnum. Now, and keep in mind, I've put one piston from each of these motors on TDC just to kind of show you the deck height and everything. Looking at the piston, the 5.9 Magnum, and I believe the 5.2 Magnums were like this as well, have a what they call a bathtub dish. These originally have a little tighter smaller combustion chamber, so they could get away with that. Drop the compression down to about 9.1 to 1. And like the 318, it sits about 25 thousandths down in the hole. A noticeable upgrade they did make to these beyond the heads, I'm talking just the short blocks. They have hydraulic roller cams in them. You can see the roller there. Uses link bars. There's a big... I've got this one pulled apart, but you know, all the lifters go in these holes, and then there's actually a spider web thing that would go and hold down between the link bars right here. But yeah, hydraulic roller. So if you change cam, you ain't have to change the lifters as well. These, I'll flip them over in a minute, but I believe these have a better connecting rod than that. Over here, the Hemi, ignore this. Like I said, this has to come back apart and potentially go to the machine shop. Completely different design. Hydraulic roller cam, but instead of coming up like a wedge head configuration, which is what those are, the push rods actually come out like this. And coming down here to the piston, it's a slight dome and 0 deck height. This was a 9.5 to 1 compression motor as well. All three of these had similar compression stock. These have the little better chamber design though. Hate to say it, wedge guys, but you know, Hemis do have the better heads. One more thing before I forget. These engines came with the option from the factory for variable valve timing. It's what these plugs are. I've got 4 of these blocks and none of them are VVT blocks, thankfully. There would be solenoids in these to shut, or not variable valve timing, multi-displacement. They would shut 4 of the cylinders off. They'd just take pressure away from the lifters and keep the valves closed. It's supposed to be an economy thing, but they're absolutely horrible about tearing stuff up. So if you build one of these and have the option to, delete that. I'm going to get these motors rolled over and we'll go. Now that I got the motors rolled over, we'll start back at the 318. Okay, 2 bolts per main, nothing special. I've got a piston rod out of each of these. I'll get into that in a second. Oil pump mounts back here. It's got a screw on pickup tube. And I'm not 100% sure, but I believe these pans are interchangeable. Oil filter mounts on the side here. Moving to the 360, same deal. 2 bolts per main. Oil pump mounts in the back. Screw on oil pump pickup. Oil filter on the side. These, like, as far as blocks go, these two are almost identical. The major difference really being the bore, because even the front covers are interchangeable. The truck this is going in needs a mechanical fuel pump, so I'm actually swapping the covers from that one and that one. Since that motor does not need mechanical fuel pump, it's got an electric pump already in the car. Just take you've got to get a long snout camshaft. Then you just take the eccentric and the covers and swap them. But coming over here to the Hemi, completely different animal, just like the pistons or the top side. 4-bolt per cylinder, or 4-bolt main, cross bolted mains, deep skirt block, much like an LS motor. Basically anything anymore is built like this. Reluctor wheels back here on these. The cam sensor goes right here. And the oil pump on these actually slides over the snout of the crank. So, little different setup. And then it has a pickup tube that comes all the way back here and up. I mean, down really, but you get my point. Moving on to the bottom end. Moving on to the pistons and rods. Now moving on to the piston and rod combo. Starting on the left here, we have the 318, 360, and 5.7, just to keep it the same as all the videos have been so far. Starting on the 318, we'll start with the rings. They use a 5/64, 5/64, 3/16 rod ring package, and the piston sits on a 6.123 inch rod. Eat your heart out, Chevy guys. Ours are stock or longer. The bore is 3.91 inches by 3.31 inch stroke. So because of the short stroke, the piston or the wrist pin sits further down in the piston to still maintain the height. Moving to the 5.9 Magnum, uses a metric 1.5, 1.5, 4.0 ring package on a 6.123 inch rod. Both of these have a 2.1 inch rod journal, so realistically you could take this rod and put it in this motor. The bore on this is 4 inches by a 3.58 inch stroke. Moving to the 5.7 Hemi, they use a 1.5, 1.5, 3.0 ring package. The rod length is 6.242, so this rod is actually longer than these two. The rod journal is 2.125, so it's just slightly bigger than this. You can't interchange these, unfortunately. Both of these rods use a through bolt design. It's got a bolt that's here and just comes through and got a nut on the end. Both of these are the same. This actually uses a cap screw design, so it's got that screw and it goes all the way through. And you can, if you look closely, right here, this is what is called a crack cap design. Stock LS motors are like this as well. And I keep mentioning LSs and not Coyotes because I've never worked on a Coyote. I have no experience with them. But basically what they do is they freeze this cap and they just shear it off. Then that makes two surfaces that mate only to each other. I have heard they are stronger this way, but I'm not positive. I mean, it makes sense. There's more surface area grasping together here. But, you know, I don't know. It makes sense to me. The bore is 3.917, so it's actually 7 thousandths bigger than the 318. With a 3.578 stroke, so it's 2 thousandths smaller than the 360. Like, they're within, you know, you'll never measure that. Which actually brings us out to 345 cubic inches. Next, onto the heads. Starting with the 318 head, being an LA engine, these are a shaft mount rocker. Instead of oiling through the push rod like a later model small block or a Chevy or a Ford does, the oil actually comes up through the rocker pedestals and distributes from there. These are 4 bolts per cylinder. This is a 302 casting head. They come on, I believe, 81 to 87 model trucks. They're more of a high compression head. They sport a 176, 172, 150 valve size stock. You can bump these up to a 188, 160 and a mild port job and support around 400 horses with these heads. They're alright for a basic build. They're a closed chamber design, so flat top piston, mill the zero deck the block, and you get a pretty healthy little motor. Moving on to the Magnum Heads, 92 to 02 model heads. Instead of a shaft mount rocker, these use individual rocker arms and oil through the push rod like small block Chevy or Ford. The exhaust housing, the exhaust flange is identical to the LA. There's a slight difference in port shape, but a big enough, like a decent set of headers, you'll never notice that. These heads stock with big, I don't even think you need bigger valves. These have 192, 160 valves. These will support 400, 450 horses stock. You cannot run, and it's the same way on the Magnum, you cannot, or the LA, you cannot run more than like 500 lift on the cam stock. These are, however, a 1.6 ratio rocker arm instead of a 1.5. The LA has stock a 1.5, which is, if you measure it out, is closer to a 1.4. And these heads will bolt to an LA block. You have to get the kit for it. The intake mounting surface is different on these. The bolt pattern's just slightly different. Other than that, they're pretty much the same as far as mounting everything. And last but not least, we have the Hemi Heads. These are completely redesigned. Shaft mount rockers. 2 spark plugs per cylinder. They actually have special coil packs that mount to these. I don't remember the valve size on these, but they're pretty healthy. These heads, of course, need cleaned up. Now, something that's probably going to get said in my comments is, oh, it's not a true Hemi. You're right. You are absolutely correct. Because it has quench pads on each side of the cylinder head here. Or the combustion chamber. A true hemispherical head, this would be completely round. Needless to say, though, this head flows right at 300 CFM at, I believe, 500 lift stock. This head outflows 90% of your LS heads. A mild gasket match on the exhaust side doesn't hurt anything. But what I showed here Those are the intake ports. That's a 15/16 socket from Harbor Freight. You can almost fit that whole deep well socket in there. Excuse me. I'm trying to get a little bit of a view, but you can kind of see the valve down there. You can kind of see the valve down here, maybe. These heads, if you take the valves out of it, is just almost straight through. So these are the junk heads. What's considered the junk heads. You can actually get the 09 and up Eagle heads and get way more port flow and a tighter combustion chamber. If you put late heads on the early motor, it makes it around 12.5 to 1 compression, which I doubt I do with this motor. This, like I said, just needs to be a mild street truck. Now, as far as horsepower per dollar, the intakes and engine management on these are expensive. These you have to work a little harder to make power, because the earlier models, you've got to change connecting rods to this rod, which actually is the same rods that's in the 360s. You've got to change the rods. You've got to change. Even this motor, I'm putting bigger valves, a bigger cam, and just all kinds of stuff in it. This motor needs an intake and a cam. The cams in these are notoriously small, and they're meant for a stock truck. These engines make an insane amount of torque for what they are, but you can put a cam in them, put an intake on them, and make a decent amount of power. So basically, in conclusion, these are all good motors. Don't get me wrong. The 318s are a little easier to come by because nobody wants them. They're a little cheaper. Everybody's scared of that 3.917 bore for some reason. But if you work with them, they have the same stroke as a 340. You can put good heads on them, make them scream. 360 is good for making torque. Like, it's easy to make power with bigger cubic inches. A 5.7 Hemi, if you don't make power with it, you're not trying. I've got a couple good friends. It's all they race. This is actually one of their old motors, and they were low tens all motor with it. So you've got to incur the cost. You've got to incur the cost of it if you want to play with that motor. But there is reward to it. All three of these can be found in a salvage yard. 03 to 08 Hemis are starting to pop up. Now, that being said, those 03 to 08 Hemis, the connecting rods on them aren't as strong as, say, an LS. And I hate to say that. I hate to keep comparing it to that. But that's the benchmark that everybody knows anymore. If you're going for a mild nitrous build or an all-motor build, though, any of these motors will do fine. So with that, follow me on TikTok at ethanol573, Instagram at 573 Racing, and you've already found YouTube, so hit that bell and subscribe. Till next time.